Hello and welcome to my first vlog book review where I will be talking about I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. I will get some trigger warnings up for this across the screen here because it contains just about everything. It contains alcoholism, sexual abuse, eating disorders. So if you may feel sensitive or triggered by any of these things, then just know that I will be discussing them later. So it's up to you if you want to keep watching. Please do always keep yourself safe. So Jennette McCurdy, you probably haven't heard of her if you're from Britain, but if you were American, then you would know that she was in a sitcom called iCarly, which is a Nickelodeon sitcom, and she was a child star. And she was a child star in the vein of Britney Spears. So it's the type of stardom where you learn to present at a young age and you're always on and you're always people pleasing and ready to give Nickelodeon and your wider audience exactly what they want. And your own needs, whether you're tired or exhausted, or in this case, whether you don't actually enjoy acting, get put last. And Jennette has a mum called Debbie. And Debbie is a stage mum, so she's very pushy. And it is really Debbie's dream to be a child actress, but for various reasons she didn't make it. So she wants her daughter to become a child actress. And this starts a whole, vicious cycle, but it really starts Jennette's life where her mum and herself are so enmeshed that Jennette almost has no sense of self without her mum. Her only sense of self is in pleasing her mum and being what her mum wants her to be. So her mum wants her to be an actress, so she's an actress. And the one time when she says, actually, mum, I'm not really enjoying acting, then Debbie, her mum, has such a massive tantrum that she immediately reneges on that and does anything just to please. And there's also an eating disorder, which is written large across this whole novel. And this is something that Debbie is more than complicit in. It's something that Debbie almost introduced Jennette to. And it's a way that mother and daughter both bond. They bond through counting calories. They bond through staying slim, and they bond through giving each other dieting tips and techniques, such as eating ice lollies instead of a proper meal or having a black coffee instead of food. And this is an eating disorder which starts when Jennette is young and which continues throughout most of her life and may well continue today. So yes, and then there's also the point of a shower. Jennette's mum, Debbie, showers Jennette until she is 17 years old. Now, Debbie is adamant that this is because she has lived with cancer for most of her life. So she wants to check Jennette for lumps. So she checks around the breast and around the vulva vagina area. But understandably, Jennette finds this a huge push, a huge removal almost of any boundaries. And the only way she can get through this exam is to dissociate. But interestingly, she can't feel like she can just ask her mum to stop. She is so given over to wanting to please her mum that without her mum there, when her mum dies, Jennette has to find her own sense of self. She has to rethink everything she learned and everything she thought she knew about and really take it back to basics and think, is this ever what I wanted for myself, or was this just to please my mum? And what's particularly good about this book, as I read it from a counsellor's point of view, is that it paints such a realistic and authentic portrayal of an abusive relationship. Because often when we think of abusive relationships, we think of doors slamming, we think of physical violence, we think of emotional violence, we think of coercion, and we think of sexual abuse. But in Jennette's case, these things are there, but they're there in a way which isn't obvious. So it's not till a lot later down the line, when Jennette's mum Debbie is dead or getting towards the end of her life, that Jennette thinks, actually, that relationship with my mum was abusive. She was abusive to me. I thought she was the centre of my world, but actually she was abusive. So it paints a very authentic and raw picture of that. And Jennette, by no means, or while she was writing the book, by no means had the whole thing neatly summed up. It feels as if she's still processing in places what went on and what happened between her and her mum, and still processing her feelings about her mum. The other thing I particularly liked about the book from a therapist's point of view is that she is realistic about therapy. As someone who goes to therapy, she tries it with one counsellor and then she ghosts that counsellor. And she does that because the counsellor is pushing her a little too hard, a little too fast to see what her mum is like. And so she takes a step back and she says, no, I can't do this. And she just doesn't turn up for any more sessions. And this is something that does happen to counsellors. It's not, I mean, it is unusual, but it's not unheard of by any means. I think if you speak to most counsellors who've had a longish career in counselling, then they will tell you about a couple of occasions where clients have just stopped turning up and they have no idea why. Luckily, Jennette does go back to counselling later on in her life, and she is able to explore at her own pace that relationship that she had with her mum. And so back to the title, which is I'm Glad My Mum Died. You may be relieved to know that Jennette is no longer a child actress. She is a writer and a director, and a very good one. But it was a long process for her to find out what she truly wanted and to go ahead and do it, and to not hear that voice of her mum or feel her mum's disapproval. It took her a long time to free from that toxic relationship. So here is the book. I got mine from Waterstones, and I paid $18.99 for it, I think.